Good evening. Do I need to push this? On behalf of the commissioners and staff, I would like to welcome you to the July 27th, 2021 City of Roseville Public Utilities Commission meeting. This 7-member commission is responsible for studying and advising the City Council regarding all utilities owned or operated by the city, including electric, water, wastewater, and solid waste. The Public Utilities Commission advises the City Council regarding planning, rates, public information, cable television franchises, and other matters relating to such enterprises, and may also hear citizen complaints as to the operation or rates. The Public Utilities Commission also advises the City Council regarding the activities of such joint power agencies as the city may be a member or which relate to such utility enterprises. Members of the public may offer public comment by phone. The dial-in phone number is 916-774-5353. That's 916-774-5353. At this time, I'd like to ask that you put your electronic devices on silent. Pam, I'm sorry. Could you please do the roll call?
Sure. Commissioner Bielski?
Here.
Commissioner DeLacy?
Here.
Commissioner DeMarkey?
Here.
Commissioner Granger has been excused tonight. Commissioner Knox?
Here.
Commissioner Maish?
Here.
And Commissioner Webb.
Here.
Chair Webb tonight.
Commissioner Knox, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 4 on the agenda is public comments. This item is for anyone who would like to address the commission on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. When addressing the commission, please state your first and last name for the record. Members of the public may offer public comment by phone. The dial-in phone number is 916-774-5353.
And there's a little bit of a delay on phones.
And when we ask for public comment, if we can wait 20 or 30 seconds for a delay on TV if we do this. Thank you.
And the chambers are open tonight, right? So we might have somebody in the audience?
And it looks like there are no phone calls.
Okay.
All right. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from June 22nd, 2021. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve?
I'll move.
And would anyone like to second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions?
Here.
So now we move to our request presentations. The first item here is the election of the chair and vice chair. In accordance with the city's boards and commissions administrative standards, the chair and vice chair shall be elected annually by the commission. The selected chair and vice chair will assume their positions at the next regular meeting in August. Do I have any nominations for chair?
Before we go into nominations, I'm gonna talk about this item a little bit just for everyone's background. Again, my name is Joe Mandel, and I'm a senior deputy city attorney for the city of Roseville. We're going to be selecting a chair and a vice chair in accordance with our administrative standards, and so the chair is going to be the presiding officer of the meeting. And so I wanted to just let you know some of the roles and duties of what the chair would be before we get to nominations and voting. So these are some of the things that you'd be in charge of as chair. You'd be the presiding officer at all the meetings. We'd ask that you attend all the meetings. You'd call the meetings to order, propose adjournment, decide all questions of order without debate, call for discussion on and votes on proposals, clarify or request that clarifications be made, rule that things are out of order, interpret and enforce meeting procedures, and ensure meetings are conducted in an efficient and productive manner. So that is what the role of the chair would be. And so in the absence of the chair, the vice chair would assume those roles. And so going forward and talking about how we're going to do the process for selection, same way that Elaine said, I'm going to ask if anybody has an interest in being chair, and you can express your interest. We'll do the chair position first and then do vice chair as a completely separate selection afterward. So after I get done with this, we can talk about who would be interested in being chair. You can explain why you would want to be chair. Anyone can be the chair on the commission. Even Blandon, who is absent, can be nominated. And so after we hear from everybody that's interested, I'll ask for nominations. Self-nominations are okay. And once we get to the nominations, then we'll move forward and do a vote. We'll take kind of a roll call vote of everyone and see who your vote for the chair position is. We'll do a motion, get it approved, and then move on to the vice chair position. So with that, is anyone interested in being the chair?
I am.
Okay. Commissioner Webb has expressed interest. Anyone else have an interest in being chair? Seeing none, this might be pretty easy. So can I have a motion from someone to appoint Commissioner Webb as chair to assume the position as chair for the next year starting in August?
Motion to elect Commissioner Webb as chairman.
Okay, excellent. Do I have a second of that motion?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner DeLacy. And we're going to do a roll call vote on this, Lynn. So if we could go through and aye or no, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Bielski?
Aye.
Commissioner DeLacy?
Aye.
Commissioner DeMarkey?
Aye.
Commissioner Granger is excused. Commissioner Knox?
Aye.
Commissioner Maish? And Commissioner Webb.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. Congratulations, Commissioner Webb. Now we'll move on to the position of vice chair. Does anyone have an interest in being the vice chair to assume the role in the event that Commissioner or Chair Webb is not here? Commissioner Knox has expressed an interest. Does anyone else have an interest? Too easy. Going once, going twice? Okay. Can I have a motion to appoint Commissioner Knox as the vice chair for the next year of the PUC?
I'll move that.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, okay. And if we can do a roll call vote again?
Sure. Commissioner Bielski?
Aye.
Commissioner DeLacy?
Aye.
Commissioner DeMarkey?
Aye.
Commissioner Knox?
Aye.
Commissioner Maish?
Aye.
And Commissioner Webb.
Aye.
Okay, congratulations to the two of you on being selected chair and vice chair. And that'll do it. You're going to assume your role essentially right now.
Okay. Moving to our next item on our agenda, we have the Public Utilities Commission roles and responsibility presentation. This will be presented by Michelle Bertolino, Environmental Utilities Director, Richard Plecker, and who's the Environmental Utilities Director, and Senior Deputy City Attorney Joe Mandel, on the background purposes, roles, and responsibilities of the Roseville Public Utilities Commission.
So good evening, Commissioners. I'm Michelle Bertolino, your Electric Utility Director, and I think you've already done more work than we probably did in the past year and a half almost, so congratulations. So tonight, this item is an overview for all of you on the PUC's purposes, roles, and responsibilities. And the last time we did this presentation, it was about 5 or 6 years ago. But we thought it was time for a refresher, since we have, most of you are new to the commission, which is awesome. I think that's great that we've got a good new, most of you are relatively new to the commission. Some of you aren't. And some of you were here pre-COVID, but it's exciting for us. We're going to go over, it's a pretty lengthy presentation tonight. We're going to try to go over it quickly, but some of it is something that we have to tell you about, like the Brown Act and different things about how we conduct meetings, how we maintain transparency for the city. And so I think what we'll do to make it probably go as efficiently as we can is to, I'm going to do the first part, then Rich is going to do part of it, and then Joe is. So maybe after each one of us speaks, we'll ask if you have questions rather than going question by question for each slide. Does that work for everybody? Okay. So, and I'm sure you're going to have lots of questions, and I'm sure you'll have more questions after tonight. So we'd be happy to go over this and follow up to questions that you might have later. And I'm sure as meetings go on the rest of this year and into next, we'll probably address some of these too. So, as you know, the Public Utilities Commission and the commissioners advise, you study and advise the City Council regarding city-owned utilities. You advise the council regarding planning, rates, public information, and other matters that come before you and that are related to the utilities. You hear citizen concerns and comments relating to utility operations and rates. And this is really a forum for public engagement and involvement. The City of Roseville is very, very focused and supportive of transparency in government, as well as getting our community involved and active. And all of you are community members that decided you want to become involved in what we do. And so that's what this is. This is really a forum for people to come and have a public discussion about what the utilities are about and what we do. So it's really all the conversations, and I know we'll talk about this later, are meant to be at a level at all times that the general public can understand. So I know each of you come here with some subject matter expertness of different areas, and so we really try to keep this at not a technical level. We can get very technical. Rich is an engineer, I'm not, but I can get pretty technical. So, but we really try to stay at a place where the general public can understand what we're talking about, just like the city council meetings. Whenever any of our documents will provide you, any of the items that will come before you will be written in a way, for the most part, that the general public can understand. So the city council, many, many years ago, a few city councils ago, the city council adopted a policy governance structure. And they still follow this very loosely. It's not as black and white as it used to be, but basically a policy governance structure has the elected officials, the city council, focusing on policy issues and the big issues. And then the staff, the city manager, and all of his staff and the city attorney all focus on running the day-to-day business of the city. So the city council delegates that authority to the city manager. And all staff, except for the city attorney's office, report through the city manager. So the city attorney's office reports directly to the council, as does the city manager. But the rest of us report up through the city manager's office. And we do not report directly to the city council for that reason. And the city council regularly and rigorously evaluates the performance and accomplishments of the organization, as well as looks at our performance and weighs it, and they provide an performance evaluation for the city manager as well as the city attorney. So the city council every year the city council has a public workshop, and we had one this year, and they adopt their priorities. And so the priorities this year are similar to last year and the year before and the year before, but over time we've really kind of refined this, or they've refined this, and really focus on what they feel is a priority and important for our community. And so the first one is to remain fiscally responsible in a changing world, to support community engagement and advocacy. And that's where the PUC really has a very strong role. Maintain a safe and healthy community, enhance economic vitality, deliver exceptional city services, and invest in well-planned infrastructure and growth. Everything that we do, every department in the city does, aligns with one of these priorities. If you ever look at a city council agenda and the city council communications that are on the agenda, every one of those states under which priorities, and sometimes it's more than one, does the item that's before the council fall under. So as I mentioned, the council holds workshops and to establish its priorities and to hear feedback and input from the community. And they do this to make sure that there's not really, or there's as little confusion as possible as to who's responsible for what. And they do hold the city manager, as I mentioned, accountable for the accomplishment of their stated priorities and expectations, and as well as his work plan and goals. And then he provides, it's a he now, could be a she in the future, the city manager provides the work program and manages us. So we work together on our work plans, but the city manager establishes our work plans and establishes that he directs our work, directs what we're supposed to do, and assigns work to us. So commissioner responsibilities and we're going to talk a lot about this. Really, it's fairly simple, but there's also a lot. So it's to avoid conflicts of interest. That's probably one of the most important things, although these are all very important, but to avoid either real or perceived conflicts of interest. And if you ever have questions about that, Joe can talk to you about that.
And we'll talk about it more in a few minutes.
Yeah. You're responsible for making recommendations and consulting with staff and council members when needed. You're responsible to respond timely to emails or phone calls. And both Lynn and Pam can reach out to all of you to find out how you best want to be communicated to. Some people like emails, some people like text, some people like phone calls, some people like other ways. And so we want to tailor whatever we do to you and how you best want to be communicated with. And to be prepared, it's important that you review the agendas and any accompanying materials or packets prior to the meeting so you know what we're going to be presenting to you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rich.
Good evening, Commissioners. As Michelle said, I'm Rich Plecker.
I was going to stop for questions so far. Sorry. Is there any questions on anything that I mentioned so far I talked about?
I had one. I've been on advisory boards before. What is should be our expectation for how our recommendations get communicated to the council?
So typically, we come to you with staff will come to you with a recommendation, and then you will, as a commission, will provide a recommendation to the council. And it's in the public forum as a body. So as a commissioner, you are part of the body of the commission. And Joe, you can talk more about it.
So when the council hears the item, eventually, they've clearly got the recommendation of this body
Yes.
before them?
Yes.
What will come before the PUC, there will be a staff report similar to what would go before the city council. So in the staff report, there will be a summary recommendation to the PUC of, if you're making the motion, you should be able to look down at the staff report and say, I'd like to make a motion that, and then essentially read that recommendation or whatever variation of it that the board wants to do. And then that would be the recommendation that would ultimately go to the city council, that PUC made this recommendation to do whatever.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Rich, you're on.
Okay, let's do this again. Hello, I'm still Rich Plecker. I'll pick up for the next few slides before we get into Joe's litany of Brown Act stuff, which he's not looking forward to either. How did this pop up? This must be autocorrect. This is a continuation of commissioner responsibilities. At commission meetings, we don't follow Rosenberg's rules of order as much as we follow Robert's rules of orders. For some reason, this has popped up like 3 times. It keeps changing it from Roberts.
It changed.
So Rosenberg's is a simplified version of Roberts, if we want to get into the exciting details about parliamentary procedure. But really all it is related to how we call meetings to order, adjourn, how we make motions and things like that. So everyone's really good at that. So Roberts and Rosenberg's are pretty similar in that respect. So
I thought we changed it all along. Oh, well. As Michelle said earlier, your level best at attending meetings is helpful, obviously. We have these once a month, and obviously coming off from this last year with the pandemic, attendance has been, it's hard when people are stretched out, but we also appreciate a heads up. If you know you can't make a meeting and knowing that in advance, that helps us. Keep meeting discussion at a level the general public will understand. As Michelle mentioned earlier, many of us that participate in this, we can get quite technical and we can go quite deep. Michelle accused me of being an engineer, and I accuse her of being a CPA. So we both have our own different domains of knowledge that the other considers esoteric and somewhat unnecessary at times. But we do have great respect for each other. But anyways, the whole idea is that we stay kind of at a level that's conversational and meaningful. And we talk about that in terms of the standard of care. With respect to the Public Utilities Commission, we don't expect you to be experts. In fact, our insurance doesn't cover you being an expert. So that's why it's kind of necessary to stay at the standard, person in the public, ask the sorts of questions that they would ask if you've got a detailed question, which Einar will from time to time, just to pick on Einar. We can talk about that offline too, but to go deep into something that was 30 years ago on a water right proceeding, probably a little bit not interesting to most people. But that doesn't mean we can't talk about it. The other point is asking questions, but not directing. So, I think this is a great forum to ask questions. Sometimes those questions are pointed. Sometimes they might be uncomfortable. But the body needs to be aware of its abilities with respect to the chain of command and directing work performance. So as the city council, Michelle talked about, the city council holds the city manager accountable. City manager holds us accountable as well, and that's just sort of the way things work. Now, we're smart enough to figure out if something's really important to you, we'll circle back and we'll check with you, but we have to be very careful about who directs what forces when it comes to matters of liability insurance and things of that nature. So we're not just trying to be mean to you. There's actually a reason there. Lastly, as you just accomplished, the last point on this slide is electing a chair and a vice chair annually. Since we have a new commission, this was kind of an interesting process this time around. I'm pretty sure the next transition to power will go pretty seamlessly, pretty effortlessly. Not that this was difficult, but that is one of your duties. Next slide. Staff responsibilities. We prepare the commission agendas and the minutes. We submit reports and presentations that describe relevant programs or projects in the city, summarize performance, including budget and schedule as appropriate, describe follow-up actions or next steps. So in the utility realm of things, the utilities combine both electric and EU are large enterprises. We have a lot of things going on. So oftentimes we have to sort of be selective in terms of what we bring to the commission. We don't bring every single thing that we've ever thought about doing every day. So this is where we sort of will put out a suggested list of topics for the coming year. Not that that's cast in stone, but these are just conversation points that are typically timely given a particular month or a time of year, things of that nature. But if you want to hear something different or you want to hear a detailed presentation, this is a two-way conversation. We, both Lynn and Pam will be talking to you with board agendas all the time, and Michelle and myself as well. We're all ears, but we try to put together a pretty comprehensive view of the utilities over the course of a given year. But if you have input, we're glad to hear it. Also, and this touches back on what Einar said earlier, in terms of summarizing commission recommendations, there's really only a few things that the commission votes on per se. Rate proceedings are one of those things. And when you take a vote on a rate proceeding, we will forward that vote to the city council as part of the ultimate approval package, as well as if there were any points or any ideas that need to be conveyed as well. You're free to talk with the city council members individually, but we will forward your vote as a body for that. So the other thing we do is we act as your advisor on the commission. So both Michelle and I are department heads. We have access to a lot of different people, a lot of different programs. We put on some really, really great tours, just to put in a little plug here, because now with us getting back together again, I think we're going to be safe to resume some of those activities, and we look forward to doing that. But ultimately, we're your advisors on matters of electric power in the city, water, wastewater, solid waste within the city. That's our role. So in practice, the commissions are really effective venues to vet ideas and concepts for public review and input. Sometimes, and this hasn't been in recent years, but sometimes in the past, I'll pick a point in time when we were doing meter retrofits in the city. The Public Utility Commission was a very valuable venue to hear from customers and residents about impacts and things that were going on in their area. Of late, it hasn't been too bad. Also, in days gone by, the negotiation of cable TV franchises was often a real big deal. And again, since cable's been deregulated, it's not such a big deal anymore. But this is a very valuable venue to really get those ideas out there, let them surface, get people thinking about them, and get some input going. The other thing to keep in mind in practice is just maintaining that sort of appropriate boundary between management and policy. The commission obviously is at a policy level, not so much at a management level. But if you're interested, again, we're more than willing to take you down a rabbit hole if you want to know something about, say, biosolids and wastewater. We're more than happy to teach you all about that stuff. So it can be challenging. It can be challenging sometimes to know where that level's at, especially when folks have a technical background, right? It's hard to sort of set those things aside, but we just ask you to try that and work with us on that. So in moving forward again in practice, I think this brings us to sort of this larger point. Learning how to ask a good question is actually a difficult skill. I tend to not ask a lot of questions. I tend to tell things a lot, but really being thoughtful and asking that thoughtful question as opposed to just saying something or making an opinion. I struggle with this personally. The commissions are, this is a really important point. Commissions are great leadership training grounds for future elected officials. I don't know if any of you are interested in higher elected office, but in the past, there are many council members that have come through the city of Roseville who have sort of cut their teeth on the Public Utilities Commission, Planning Commission, other things. And it's been viewed as a way to sort of practice up and get ready for sort of that role. I not say that you have to, or we certainly want you to if you're willing. But as such, it's kind of a training ground. You'll see that at times we will bring staff in at various levels who may not have a lot of practice with public speaking. So we ask for your patience and ask for your consideration as they too are sort of learning these roles. Michelle and I have done this for a number of years. You can get all over us for our public speaking skills or lack thereof, but a lot of our staff are working through it. They're kind of learning the ropes, and this is how we sort of do it here in Roseville. So, in summary, the PUC is an advisor to the City Council, especially on matters of rates and other matters of importance to the utilities. That tends to be the big one. Your recommendations should be consistent with the City Council priorities. Michelle mentioned that previously. We spend quite a bit of time, usually around October, with the Council Goals Workshop. Look for that. It'll be coming up here pretty quick. But the council really, with all the things that you could pay attention to, they sort of choose the things that they really want to pay attention to and get accomplished rather than everything in the world. They try to pick a discrete set of things that they can focus on. And then lastly is providing that public forum for information sharing and discussion. It's not often that we get a lot of public participation. Usually in school years, we'll get high school kids that'll come in that need to have a stamp on their government class or civics class or something like that. And we try to go out of our way to embrace that interest. But as you'll find out, we have a hard time getting people interested in what we do for a living. So we're looking to figure out how to do a better job at that always. So next slide is Joe.
We're going to be able to get more people right now just based on this exciting subject matter.
Oh, we didn't ask for questions.
Yeah, go ahead. If you guys want to ask questions on this part first before I get into mine. Mine's the most exciting, so buckle up for the next couple hours. Just kidding. Hi, everyone. I'm going to do a short presentation tonight on a set of laws focused around public participation and transparency. The laws are commonly referred to as the Brown Act, the Conflict of Interest Laws, and the California Public Records Act, and I'm going to explain to everybody how those laws apply to the Public Utilities Commission. So if you've served on a board or commission before, you may be familiar with some of this, but there were some new laws that were adopted last year that relate to the Brown Act, so this will be a good refresher for those of you that have had this before, but there's some new laws regarding social media and the use of social media that you'll want to be aware of that I'll get into. So going on to this slide, the first question on everyone's mind is, what is the Brown Act? And so the Brown Act is an act that was passed by the California State Legislature, authored by Ralph M. Brown back in 1953, that guarantees the public's right to participate and attend meetings of local legislative bodies. It's part of a group of sunshine laws, as they were called back in the 1950s to 1970s, basically to ensure that certain proceedings of the government were open and available to the public. And so if you're interested in looking up some of the background on the on the Brown Act, it starts at California Government Code Section 54950, if anybody's taking notes at home. And the basic rule behind the Brown Act is this. It's that a majority of the members of a legislative body cannot get together to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any matter that would go before the commission unless it's at a properly noticed meeting. So the main principles of the Brown Act are really about transparency and allowing public participation. So to go through a couple of the notes on this slide, the public has the right to know what actions are being taken by its elected and appointed officials. The legislative body needs to meet out in the open and not secretly, and the public has the right to attend and participate in public meetings. So that's really the main points of the Brown Act. Next slide, please. Who does the Brown Act apply to? It applies to governing bodies of a city or a county, such as the Roseville City Council or the Placer County Board of Supervisors. And that second bullet is what applies to the Public Utilities Commission, because we are a subsidiary body that was created by formal action. And just to go into some of the background, back in 1985, the City Council established the Public Utilities Commission. If you want to look up any of the details on it, it's in the Roseville Municipal Code at Chapter 2.22 is where we talk about some of the PUC and the roles and responsibilities for some of the background there. So the Brown Act does apply to this commission, and so I will talk about what some of that means and what we need to do since the Brown Act applies. Next slide, please. So since the Brown Act does apply, there's certain requirements that need to be met to adequately inform the public of any actions that are being taken. So before we hold a public meeting of the PUC, we need to make sure that we provide proper notice to the public, and we do that by posting an agenda. So we're kind of breaking this up into a notice and an agenda. So with regarding proper noticing of a meeting, if we have a regular meeting, we need to post that notice within 72 hours in advance in a publicly accessible place. If we hold a special meeting, that notice needs to be posted within 24 hours in advance. Most of these meetings are always going to be regular meetings, 72 hours in advance, but you may see city council meetings and things like that called on 24 hours notice, which would be a special meeting. And so that comment about in a publicly accessible place in Roseville, those would be things like the libraries, all three of our libraries, Maidu, Martha Riley, and Downtown Library. The Civic Center is also a publicly accessible place that we post agendas, as well as online. And COVID has certainly impacted some of our procedures related to public meetings, but as you've seen from some of our other meetings, we can hold them on Teams or otherwise that make them accessible to everybody so that we can still have our public meetings and hold them as necessary. Next slide, please. In addition to providing the public with proper notice, an agenda needs to also be published and posted. And the purpose of the agenda is to inform the public about what the commission is acting upon at the meeting. So in the agenda, you need to provide an opportunity for people to make public comment, and you can't prohibit any criticism. You need to provide a general, brief description of each item of business to be transacted or discussed at the meeting, and no item or discussion can take place on any items not posted on the agenda. So those are important things for when we're moving forward. Sometimes people want to talk about items that are not on the agenda. We can put those on future agenda items or on future agendas as an agenda item to talk about, but really we're limited to what is posted on this agenda. And so next slide, please. So part of our job in the city attorney's office is making sure that we're compliant with the Brown Act. For each one of the city has 15 different boards and commissions, and so the city attorney's office staffs each one of those boards and commissions, and making sure that we're in compliance with the Brown Act, and you up there can focus more of your time on the subject matter and less on, the procedural aspects of it, because the Brown Act applies to every meeting. And so here I'm going to go over the definition of what is technically a meeting under the Brown Act. And so you can see that a meeting is defined as any congregation of a majority of the members of a legislative body at the same time or location to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action upon any item within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. So a couple of key points in this definition that you're looking at are a majority of the members cannot get together at the same time and location to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on anything. So that's what we're focused on here. Next slide, please. Probably one of the biggest issues these days, and a potential Brown Act violation, is regarding a type of prohibited meeting called a seriatim meeting. And seriatim really is just a fancy Latin word for a series of meetings. And so the concern here with the seriatim meeting is that a majority of the members shall not, outside of an authorized meeting, use a series of communications of any kind, directly or through intermediaries, to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item of business of the legislative body. That also includes emails. So a couple of the most common examples of potential Brown Act violations are shown on this slide. One of them is called the chain of communications, and this one's really just the rumor mill chain, where it starts with Commissioner A says something to Commissioner B that gets sent along the way down the line and communicated all the way down. So that is not allowed because the positions and communications amongst others are passing down the line, and so those things need to take place at a public meeting. The other type of prohibited seriatim meeting is called the hub of the wheel, and that's essentially where one member acts as the hub and goes out and speaks to the individual members as the spokes of the wheel. And so both of those are things that I would prefer that everyone avoid doing so that we don't encounter any sorts of Brown Act violations. Next slide, please. So the issue of serial meetings has become a hot topic over the last couple of years with the increased use of social media. And so you can see how you can encounter a Brown Act problem with things like emails, reply to alls, group texts, Facebook comments, Nextdoor, those types of things that people are on. And so you're allowed to be on those sorts of, all of those types of communications, but really what we want you to focus on is make sure you're just providing information, answering questions from the public, soliciting information from the public on commission business. And the middle bullet point there, usually a single contact between one public official and another one would not normally constitute a prohibited meeting because it's less than a quorum of the body. However, different rules apply for social media. So this was a rule, a new law that was passed last year, California Assembly Bill 992, that was passed in 2020 to address public officials' use of social media. So going into the next slide, we'll see how this AB 992 changes, kind of the way that the Brown Act is applied. So you can see here from this slide, AB 992 prohibits members of a legislative body from responding directly to any communication on an internet-based social media platform regarding a matter that's within the social subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body that's made, posted, or shared by any other member of the legislative body. Really what's important in here is that if a public official writes or comments or something in another public official's social media post, that's a Brown Act violation. So looking at that final bullet on this slide, AB 992 prohibits, commenting, retweeting, liking, emojis, thumbs ups, screenshots, reposts, all this stuff. Anything on a social media platform where you're responding as a commissioner to another commissioner's posts, that would be a Brown Act violation under AB 992. So just something to be aware of if you're active out there on social media and wanting to get information out there. Please don't post anything in reaction to another in reaction to another member's social media post. You're welcome to post anything. Just again, please keep it to yourselves and not post on anybody else's. That's the big takeaway out of AB 992. Now, despite all of these restrictions, there's certain individual communications that are allowed. And so we can go on to the next slide and talk about those. So again, you're allowed to engage in separate communications outside of a meeting if you're answering questions, if you're providing information, as long as you're not communicating any of the comments or the position of the other members. We need to make sure that we keep that information, only spoken at publicly noticed meetings like this one. And any emails concerning commission business are public records, even if you send them on your personal devices or from a personal account. And I'll go into that a little bit more later, but just something to be aware of, that even if you're sending an email regarding commission business on your personal device, it still can absolutely be disclosable as a public record. So key points here are really that you can answer questions and provide information, but don't communicate the comments or positions to any other members of the commission. So next slide. So now that we know what is a meeting, what are violations and things like that, there are exceptions to this rule of what is a meeting. And so these are the 5 main types of interactions that are not considered a meeting under the Brown Act. And this is a question that we get asked frequently in our office, in the city attorney's office. So this is kind of your cheat sheet to be able to use for in the future about what is not a meeting. And so you can see here the 5 bullets going through them. Top one, any conference that's open to the public that involves a discussion of issues of general interest, that is not considered a Brown Act meeting. If it's an open and publicized community meeting organized by a person or organization other than the local agency, these are things like Arcona, the Roseville Coalition of Neighborhood Associations. If they had a meeting, that would be something that you could attend and not be in violation of the Brown Act. Third bullet, if you attend an open and noticed meeting of another body of a local agency, that could be Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting, it could be a Placer County Water Agency type of meeting, any other meeting of a legislative body that is open and noticed already. And then the final 2 bullets, attending a purely social or ceremonial occasion, if you're at a retirement party, if you're at a concert in the square, if you're out to dinner or something like that, that's just a social occasion. As well as if you are attending a standing committee as an observer. You can go to any other meeting, other people can go to meetings, they can sit out. We could have all the council members here as long as they're attending just as an observer. No talking, no deliberating, no participating at all. But you can attend other meetings as an observer. So these are all types of interactions that would not be a violation of the Brown Act if you did any of these. Again, you're welcome to email me, call me if you ever have a question, if you're ever in a situation where you don't know if you should be doing something, yes or no. We're happy to answer that anytime. Next slide. Because we don't want there to be any penalties for you for violating the Brown Act. Just as an FYI, so that you're aware of it, there are criminal penalties that are potential if you violate the Brown Act. Just to note, for a criminal penalty to apply, there needs to be knowledge and an intent to deceive the public. So if you know that something should be heard before the public and noticed as part of the Brown Act, and we're intending to, skirt it by the public, that is something that if you have the knowledge and intent to do that, all of the members who attended that meeting could be, subject to criminal penalties. There are also civil remedies available for stopping Brown Act violations. There can be injunctions filed to stop actions from happening. There can be injunctions filed to prevent future violations. These can be brought by the district attorney or any resident of the city of Roseville, as well as there can be invalidation actions filed to invalidate an item that's not in substantial compliance with the Brown Act. So you can see how something like if we were to do a rate increase or something that was not in compliance with the Brown Act, that would have a great effect on moving that forward because it could be invalidated for not following proper procedure. So we're going to move on into a separate topic now of conflicts of interest, but I'm kind of going to stop here so that we can just talk about Brown Act things and meetings and public noticing, and I'm just going to open it up to you guys, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them before we move on to the next topic. Does anyone have any questions about this? You're always welcome to call me, email me, any of the attorneys in our office. Again, we have 15 boards and commissions. We're all up to speed on Brown Act stuff. You're welcome to call us anytime, just not too late. Okay, moving away from this first topic of the Brown Act, we're going on to another topic of conflicts of interest. And Michelle mentioned this was something that was incredibly important. This is very important for all of our boards and commissions. It just has a different level of importance based on the various boards and commissions that you're on. City council, planning commission, those might be a little bit more applicable for conflicts of interest, but something that we all need to be aware of for sure on this commission. And really, the general premise of conflicts of interest and conflicts of interest laws are that city officials shouldn't be making decisions on or participate in matters that may result in personal gain or impermissible bias. So you see the four bullets there are the four main categories of the types of conflict of interest laws that we look at. The first one is California Government Code Section 1090, which relates specifically to conflicts in contracts. And what that provision in California Government Code Section 1090 says is that a public official may not make a contract in which he or she is financially interested. Just period, end of story. You may not make a contract in which you're financially interested. You can't recuse yourself in that situation and have the other people vote on it on the commission. You're absolutely prohibited. The city can't enter into that contract. So that's really the gist of Government Code Section 1090 related to contracts. The Political Reform Act is another big area of conflict of interest law. The Political Reform Act was passed in 1974, and what this was related to is it's related to addressing financial conflicts of interest of public officials. And what you're doing is you're making disclosures of your economic interests, and it prohibits you from participating in making decisions that you know or have reason to know will result in a material financial effect on one of your economic interests. So when you applied for this commission, you filled out a California Fair Political Practices Commission Form 700, which was your statement of economic interests. It was your, what are my sources of income? What are my spouse's sources of income? What are my gifts? What are my rental properties in the area? What are my business entities that I own that I have an interest in? Those are the types of things we're looking at to make sure that there are no conflicts of any items that come before you. Make sure you're not unjustly enriching yourself in some way. We look at what sorts of properties you own. Again, this is more, planning commission and public and city council related, when we're looking at things like properties and business entities that you own. But it's important for you all to be aware because the commissioners are responsible for ensuring that you're in compliance with conflict of interest laws. It's not necessarily our job in the city attorney's office. We identify conflicts and let council members know and let other department heads know, generally where your conflicts lie and to be aware of them. But it's ultimately the responsibility is up to you. And so any violations would be, yours to handle. We can provide advice in the city attorney's office, but not binding advice. But if you wanted to get some advice on something from the FPPC, they also have a hotline that they can provide you with written advice if there's anything that you're interested in. But please call me first, or if you have any questions, and I can kind of guide you down the road of where we would be going with it if you have any questions about Political Reform Act, because there's a big analysis that you do as an attorney to determine whether or not there's an economic interest that's being impacted by someone's decision. The final two items, the doctrine of incompatible office is really related to conflicts and duties. And really what it is you can't hold two offices that have incompatible or overlapping duties, and you can't hold those simultaneously because there's a potential for a conflict or overlap in your functions and responsibilities. That's not really the case here with this Public Utilities Commission, but it has happened on other commissions that we've had where if you get appointed to another commission, you'd essentially be on that new commission and automatically vacate if you were on the PUC, you'd vacate that role. And then the final bullet on here is related to campaign contributions and bias. And really what we're trying to do here is just avoid any appearance of impropriety related to campaign contributions or related to anything that would show an appearance or a potential appearance of bias. We're trying to avoid that and be impartial without any prejudices. So that's the main four types of conflicts of interest. If we move on to the next slide. Oh, easy. You go back one. I don't know if there was another slide in there. Oh, okay. Easy enough. We'll stop there. So conflicts of interest stuff. Does anybody have any questions about any of these items that are listed here about conflicts of interest? Again, happy to answer any questions. When Form 700s come up, you're welcome to email me, call me, ask me any questions about what you need to report. And, I know it kind of gets confusing sometimes about gifts or sources of income or, stock ownership or something like that and how that would apply and what you need to report. So again, happy to help out wherever I can, but my advice is not binding, so take it with a grain of salt, you know. Next slide, please. So third topic, we're in the home stretch here, California Public Records Act. And I wanted to bring up the Public Records Act because I want everybody to be aware of the Public Records Act is out there in California Government Code section 6250 and several sections thereafter. And what the purpose of the Public Records Act is it's the public is allowed to receive information that allows them to monitor what's going on and with the functioning of their government. The legislature, in passing the Public Records Act, declared that the public has the right to access information. This is a fundamental and necessary right. And when you look at whether or not something should be disclosed as a public record, the overall policy and all the case law really favors disclosure. There's very narrowly construed exceptions. We're talking things like police officer records or drafts of documents that are not final or attorney-client privilege documents. Those are the types of things that would be specifically excluded. But for the most part, think about all of the communications that you would be having, all of the emails that you would send around, you know, to staff or however, all of that could potentially be disclosed as public record. So just something to be aware of as you're typing things up and sending out messages. So next slide, please. So yeah, again, emails concerning PUC business are public records, even if they're sent on your personal device or from your personal account. So the idea here, when I say that don't use personal accounts or devices to conduct city business and open an email account, if you're on, say, something like Facebook, people have their personal Facebook page, and then sometimes they'll create also a Facebook page. I'm the same person, but this is just my role as a PUC commissioner or whatever board I'm on. Also, you can create an email address. You know, if you have a Gmail of, you know, John Doe at Gmail, you can make it, you know, John Doe PUC at Gmail, so that in the event anybody ever makes a public records request, you have that information available. You can just forward it over. It can all be disclosed. Otherwise, there's kind of the potential nightmare scenario of hand over your device or all of your, you know, Gmail, Yahoo, and I'm going to flip through them and see which ones are disclosable. And I don't think anybody wants us going through that sort of exercise. So just so you're all aware, the definition of a public record for purposes of this is any writing containing information relating to the conduct of the local agency's business that's prepared, owned, used, and retained by the city regardless of the physical form. So again, for you guys, it'll be mostly things like emails and calendars, all of our agendas and minutes and packets, all of that is public record. And so just something to be aware of as you're making communications. Next slide, please. Is it? My final words of advice or caution, however you want to look at it, is really that a majority of the members cannot discuss PUC business items among themselves. No seriatim meetings. Please be careful with all your social media posts and comments, especially with regard to AB 992 and how we shouldn't be. We're not looking at a majority of the members at all. We're just looking at 2 members for purposes of social media. And, you know, think twice before you do email forwards and replies. Whenever I send or all of us send a message out to the commission, we typically say, please don't reply to all, or we'll put you in the BCC line so that you can't reply to all purposely. And that's why we're doing that, to prevent Brown Act violations. And so if anybody has any questions ever along the way about any of this stuff, you're welcome again to call our office. There's our phone number. You have my email address, and we're available all the time. And so I'm happy to answer any questions about any portion of the presentation or just Public Records Act stuff, and happy to answer any questions. Okay. Too easy. If it comes up, I'll still be here. Okay, we're going to turn it back to Michelle and Rich now to talk a little bit more about some of their work programs that they're going to be holding over the course of the year for environmental utilities and the electric department.
Okay, I guess mine go first. I know I've kind of broken it down into 3 logical groups since we have 3 logical utility groups inside of EU. In terms of major work efforts that are underway right now on the water side, these are somewhat recurring themes in our utilities, just to sort of frame this. Again, this is not every single thing that we're working on. These are sort of the big rocks. You might have heard it described as the big rocks before. Continued policy and legislative work on drought and reliability. This has been something that we've been really focused on for the better part of the last 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. Without going into great detail, we've managed, both utilities, we've managed to insert ourselves in the policy and regulatory process in a much more proactive way than we have in the past. So we're in the space now where we're actively trying to shape and modify policy that's coming to us both at the federal and from the federal and state level. As you might imagine, and you'll kind of pick this up as things go on, there are a number of other governmental bodies out there that really try to help us, and we expend a great deal of energy trying to get them to not help us. Those both from Sacramento and from Washington, D.C. In a lot of ways, we say that tongue-in-cheek, but we try to inform our other policymakers about the actualities of operating a utility from our perspective. It's been quite effective. So we continue to do that, invest in that quite heavily. As you're going to hear a little bit later, we are in the midst of the drought. That is a discussion that's ongoing, as you might imagine, every week. There's no shortage of meetings to talk about that, especially amongst the federal and state projects who operate water systems here in California, as well as amongst our regional partners. We're also focused on regional water development, and that's a rather broad statement, but what that means is that we're looking for water. City's got a very active groundwater development program in place. We spent the better part of last year looking for additional sites for groundwater wells throughout Roseville. We also looked for expanded opportunities to partner with neighboring agencies, whether that be interties, whether that be new pipelines, different configurations to reduce our dependency on Folsom Dam. Placer County Water Agency, you'll hear us talking about, is probably our best partner. They're a Placer County agency that was created by the people of Placer County to construct the Middle Fork project back in the 60s. Over time, you'll hear about them. You'll come to know who they are. But we help each other a great deal, and not just regional water development, but also in related matters as well. So that's just kind of a high point on that second bullet. Then the third part, infrastructure resiliency. You see, this ties back to a council priority. City Council has very high expectations, I think, of Roseville's infrastructure. We follow that part and parcel with all the systems that we operate. One of the things I can tell you that sets Roseville apart from many other utilities nationwide, as a matter of fact, is our focus on rehabilitation. So in Roseville, we have a defined rehabilitation program for all of our utilities. All of our assets are identified. We do a condition assessment on them, and then we start putting money aside to replace them at various points in their life cycle. We're one of the very few utilities that I'm aware of. I spent several years in consulting prior to here. We're one of the very few that I've ever seen do that in cash. So a portion of your rate dollars that you spend every year goes into that rehabilitation reserve to rebuild those assets into the future, and it works quite well. So it's something we can thank our forefathers for. On the next slide, so there's kind of high points there on water. On the wastewater side of things, we have two significant projects going on at our Pleasant Grove plant. We own and operate two regional facilities in Roseville for treating wastewater. One, the Dry Creek plant, and the second one is Pleasant Grove. Dry Creek was the original plant that's been upgraded and expanded several times since the beginning of Roseville. Pleasant Grove is a newer plant that was built in the early 2000s. Pleasant Grove right now is undergoing a capacity expansion that has been planned basically since the day we designed the plant. But as you might imagine, we don't really design and construct the ultimate size of a facility when it's born. We do that strategically at different points along in time because we don't want to pay all that money up front for facilities or infrastructure that we're not using. So we're doing that right now. We're doing that expansion. Plus, at the same time, we're constructing an energy recovery project, which will essentially turn waste products into renewable compressed natural gas for creating a fuel source source for our solid waste fleet. So in the future, our solid waste fleet, actually not in the future, they're doing that right now, the solid waste fleet is powered by renewable compressed natural gas. So it's a pretty slick setup. We'll have you all out to show you how it works. But that project is just about done. It's in the waste energy project's in the commissioning phase. And then whatever gas we don't use, we have turbines that we can spin to generate electricity. So all that energy that's produced on site is kept in a closed cycle and recovered appropriately. Wastewater, you heard me mention earlier about rehabilitation. Our wastewater utilities probably has one of the most robust rehabilitation programs of any of our utilities, at least in EU. A little bit further along, there's no end to the number of pipes, lift stations, pumps, things of this nature that just due to the nature of what we do and how we treat wastes, they're continually getting worn out, they're getting beat up, all these different things. So there's a whole crew of people that devote themselves to just rehabilitating pipelines. Last point on wastewater, and you'll hear this theme pop up from time to time, succession planning is something that we work on really hard at the city, mainly because, some of us want to retire someday and we're not allowed to retire until we find our replacement. But in all seriousness, most organizations are facing a bit of this challenge, especially in the utility space. And we'll talk about this more, but a lot of the younger generation are not necessarily attracted to careers in utility service. It doesn't occur to people that that's a good and viable way to earn a living. And so we have some pretty extensive programs in place that helps people see their future in a career in the utilities. It's hard sometimes to describe to people how did you get on this pathway to your career? How did it occur to you? What kind of education did you have to have? What kind of experience did you have to have? So we're pretty active in this regard. We're in good shape, but like most organizations, I would say where we struggle the most is sort of at the mid-management level. There's some things that deal with civil service or city employment that make this a bit of a challenge. We have sort of a one person, one job sort of a concept. So, if somebody like really good comes knocking on the door, we can't just hire them. We have to have a vacancy or we have to have a spot or a position to put them in. So sometimes that creates challenges, but that's a particular focus of this utility in EU right now. On the next slide, we'll talk about solid waste and stormwater. If any of you live on the west side of Roseville, you're probably undergoing a 3-can waste can pilot right now. But we are continuing to implement regulations once again. This regards organics disposal. In the next couple of years, we're going to have to take all the organic material from the municipal solid waste stream out of the landfill. So right now we're piloting different methods in different can configurations, different strategies for how we go about doing that. So last year we conducted a pilot in the Mahaney neighborhood. And actually, we'll make this a separate agenda item in the future. But the outcome of that was quite stunning because people in Roseville tend to like the 2-can setup, and I'll vote for myself because I like the 2-can setup. And I don't really want it, nor was I interested in the 3rd can. And most of the folks that went through the first phase of the pilot, they started off with that premise. But at about the 6-month point, they really liked that 3rd can. They really, really like that 3rd can, especially for things like Amazon boxes, things of that nature. So we'll talk about some of the ins and outs of that. By the time we ended that pilot at approximately the year point, I think we were at about 80% customer satisfaction. And the only thing that drew it down was, what do I do with this 3rd can? Where do I park the darn thing? So those remain some of the challenges, but rest assured, we're doing this to comply with regulations, not because this is something that we really want or enjoy doing. But this is just adapting ourselves to the future. And the third major bullet on the solid waste, you heard me mention earlier that our solid waste fleet burns CNG instead of diesel. There's a big push out right now to electrify commercial fleets, which Michelle is elated with because that requires power and lots of assets to do that. And I think that's wonderful. The problem is that electric garbage trucks haven't been invented yet, nor have they been proofed or tested, or just doing sort of the simple math calculations on the weight of the battery and what's then the payload of the garbage truck our estimation is we'd have to buy somewhere between 3 and 4 times the number of garbage trucks we have right now just because of the reduced payload. So this is why we continue to advocate for renewable CNG fuel. It's already here. Let's use it. Let's make maximum use of it. But we'll see how that goes into the future. So from that standpoint, that's about it from EU. Again, very high level. I think Michelle's next.
Do you have any questions
Yeah,
for
if
Rich?
you got any questions.
Forgive me, what's the little R in front of CNG stand for?
Renewable.
Renewable, duh. Okay, thank you.
It's a green fuel because it's already there, right? It's renewable.
Gotcha.
Okay, if there's no questions for Rich, I'll go over our major work efforts. Since we only have one utility for the electric utility, there's just one group of major work efforts. Top of mind right now is summer reliability and resiliency. You all have probably heard about what's going on throughout California with energy shortages during heat waves, with wildfire smoke impacts on delivery of electricity. And we work tirelessly, my staff, 24/7 to make sure that we keep the lights on in Roseville the best we can. We are not immune to what's going on around us. We are subject to outages because of this, and I have an update later. I was going to talk a little bit more about it, but we haven't had rolling outages or public safety power shutoffs, but that doesn't mean we won't. And so we are doing everything we can. The way we're situated and the way we're interconnected to the larger grid makes it less likely for us. We're not part of the California ISO, Independent System Operator, so they don't manage our grid, but what happens in that large of a grid next to us will impact us at times. We have a rate case coming up, a rate proposal that will, if it's approved by the City Council, will take effect in January of 2022. We start public outreach on that next month, and we will be the plan right now is to come back to the Commission with a recommendation in September. And then we would go to the City Council. It has to go through 2 readings at the City Council in either late October, early November, and then 30 days, or no, 2 weeks after that. Then it takes effect 30 days after the second reading. We are in the process of a dispatch center upgrade. So our dispatch center is kind of the brain behind our entire Roseville grid or distribution system. And up until now, we've had a very manual look at what our system looks like. It was this big wall with paper and lots of thumbtacks. And so we're actually upgrading that to a technology-based system, as well as changing the physical layout of the system to make it more conducive to what our dispatchers need to do. We are starting our integrated resource plan. This is something we do every 5 years. It's basically a look ahead into the future of where our electricity resources need to come from, what are the regulatory requirements, what are our customer needs going to be, and try to put together a plan that's a roadmap for us for electricity or energy resource purchases and acquisitions in the future. We will be coming to the PUC at a later date. It's a multi-year process to get there, but we will be coming to you with briefings on this. We're also in the process of a meter upgrade project in partnership with the water utility. We are upgrading our meters so that we can have two-way communication. So right now, our meters don't talk to us, but with the new meters, we will have two-way communication. So if a meter's out, it will tell us. Right now, our meters today, if it's out, the way we find out is we get phone calls or we have other pieces of equipment that are somewhere around there that are telling us. So the new meters, we're one of the last utilities in the state to do this, and there's a whole lot of reasons why that is. It's not bad or good, it just is. But it's a massive project for us. It's actually the city's largest technology project ever undertaken. Small cell attachments, which what these are when you hear about 5G, that's what this is, although 5G isn't actually really being used right now. but it's 4G and 5G. And so under federal regulations, we can't tell communication companies where they can or cannot attach small cell attachments for their communication networks. We have to allow them to put them almost anywhere they want to. We do try to review them. We do try to space them out. But at the end of the day, they get to pretty much come in and blanket neighborhoods with their attachments. And so this is a huge undertaking for us because they are coming through Roseville and attaching small cell attachments, mostly to our streetlights. So we manage and maintain all the streetlights in town. They're mostly attaching to streetlights, but they're also allowed to attach to any right-of-way area or any public facility. So it's a huge issue for us. Our IT department was able to put together a really great website where the communication companies can go on and reserve different streetlights or reserve different assets, and then we work with them on what we try to get them to work with us. We do get complaints from neighbors and residents about where they're attaching, but we really have no say because of the federal government has taken away that right for local governments. Electrification, Rich talked about electric garbage trucks. Electrification is electrification of everything. So it's electric vehicles, it's electric homes, it's electrifying everything. The major push here is for greenhouse gas emission reductions, but this obviously will create changes to how we manage our grid, changes on how people use electricity, and changes to what we need to do. So that's something a lot of it's in the future, a lot of it's unknown, but it's something we're very much focused on. We're very focused on infrastructure rehabilitation, expansion, and replacement. Our city is growing, and at the same time, a lot of our system is getting older, and we're really needing to invest quite a bit of money in maintaining the infrastructure so we can have the resiliency and the reliability that we need and want. Security and aesthetic improvements. We have a number of substations around town, and you may notice that most of them are, I call them kind of ugly. There's one very pretty one that's over on Eureka, the Hard Rock substation, but most of them just have the cinder block walls and there's not a lot of landscaping. And so we went through and did a security assessment of all of our assets, and we determined where we need to make security improvements. And at the same time, we're going to do some aesthetic and landscaping improvements. So you'll start seeing that. One of the first ones we're going to be working on is the substation that's off of Fitiment, that has a pretty large piece of property in front of it that's fairly vacant. A lot of people were dumping things there, and so we just went out to bid for some landscaping improvements to happen there. And then the other thing which is super exciting for us is that in early 2020, we bought 116 South Grant Street, which is right across from the Civic Center here. It's a office building that's been, I'm pointing the wrong way, an office building that's been vacant since it was built. I don't know, you probably have all noticed it. And we purchased it in early 2020, and we're going to be consolidating all of our customer service and utility billing services into that building. So right now, utility billing lives here in the Civic Center. They're going to be moving there, and all of our customer service staff are going to be moving there with them. So it'll be a one-stop shop for customers and residents and businesses. And we'll have some demonstration areas there. It's very exciting. We just issued an RFP for the construction work. We hope to have staff moving in there by the end of the year. So we're very excited about that. It's going to be really improved service for all of our customers and the community. They are doing work over there right now. You'll see scaffolding, and that was because the windows on the second through fourth floor, the flashing was installed improperly, and so we needed to have somebody come in and reinstall the windows and flashing. So I think that's it on mine. I'd be happy to answer any questions before we go to closing thoughts. So I won't repeat there was this last slide that was closing thoughts, but really the message is, I know there was a lot of detail there and a lot of information on the legal stuff, but it's really important that we talk about that and that we all understand what's required of us. And we really appreciate your volunteering and your being on this commission. We are here to help you. Roseville has a very lengthy reputation in being very helpful, very open, very accommodating, and so we want you to know that we're here to help you, we're here to support you, and this is very serious work we do, but we also try to have some fun and throw a little bit of humor, although Rich is humorless, but. No, Rich probably has one of the strongest sense of humors of all the department heads. But anyway, so thank you, and we were here to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from this side?
No questions, but I thought the presentations were excellent. Thank you very much.
I like all that. Really good. Really thorough. Impressive.
This is the point where we move to commissioner and staff reports, board member reports. Is there any?
Hang on, I think we
Wait, or did I skip something?
definitely have more. I just don't
Oh, we
know
have a
what my
lot more?
agenda is.
Okay, sorry.
We need public comment.
We've still got,
Can we call
we're
for
s- oh,
public
we're
comment
still
on this
here.
item? Ask if any members of the public would like to comment.
yeah. I'm requesting public comment on the presentation of, that we just heard.
If anybody from the public would like, no, there you go. 774-5353 is the number.
Hearing no call-in comments, if we can move to the next agenda item, which is, where do we go? We did that one. Michelle Berlino, are you up for the electric monthly update?
Yes, thank you, Chair Webb. I'll be very brief because we've got lots of things coming up after this, and you've already listened to a long presentation. So first, I mentioned that we do have our upcoming rate proposal, and we're going to start public outreach next month. And I just want to mention, and for those that might be watching or listening, that our first public workshop will be August 12th, next month at 5:30 at the Martha Riley Library. The second public workshop will be August 26th at 5:30 at the Maidu Community Center. And all of this will be on our website, and all of this we'll be communicating this to our customers. And then we're going to, and both of those are planned right now to be in person. And then we're going to be having a virtual Microsoft Teams meeting on August 31st, and there's going to be more to come on that, but we just recently scheduled that. So 3 opportunities for people to listen to the proposal and provide public input. And then again, as I mentioned, we'll be coming to the commission in September at your September meeting. So in late June, last month, we began disconnecting customers for non-payment once again. So we stopped disconnecting folks for non-payment back in March of 2020. And we started back up last month. We have a tremendous amount of programs and resources for our customers who cannot afford to pay their bill. And we've been able to, we have a low-income program. The rules for electric utilities are very different from water utilities. So water and wastewater utilities cannot, we can spend money on low-income programs. We have much more flexibility in spending money on low-income programs. There's a state law that requires that we set aside a certain amount of our money, and that go to energy efficiency and low-income and research and development programs. So we have lots of resources in additional to federal and state funding for customers who can't pay their bill. What we found in response to this, to our starting back up with our disconnections, is that we got a very strong response from our customers, and we were able to reduce our delinquencies by 30% in less than a month. So customers paid or entered into payment plans, and we require a down payment for that. But we had very few disconnections for non-payment. Now, we can't disconnect for water under state rules, but we can for electricity. Now, other utilities are not yet, other electric utilities haven't started back up. There are some. But PG&E and SMUD both are, I know PG&E is under the state rules, but I think they're waiting till later this year or early next year. So I think we've been very successful at working with our customers, and we really are very flexible. I even got some calls from customers directly, so we're able to work out some kind of plan for folks if they truly can't pay. And then lastly, I'll mention again a little bit about reliability and resilience. So this summer is extremely challenging. You've heard about power outages because of electricity shortages in California and outside of California. Texas experienced something similar in the winter. And what we're seeing is very significant impacts because of extreme weather events as well as wildfire and wildfire smoke. So wildfire smoke can impact power lines' abilities to deliver electricity. So a couple weeks ago, we had a significant electricity shortage throughout California because some major transmission lines north of us were out of service because of wildfire smoke. And so it was a scramble for many utilities to avoid outages. So we're not even halfway through summer and wildfire season. So we are getting the word out to our customers and getting word out to everybody that will listen that we are subject to the outages, rolling outages, if there is a shortage that affects us. We are, if there's a flex alert issued statewide, we're going to ask our customers to conserve if they can. We have a lot of our larger energy users in Roseville. We partner with them, so if we need them to cut back on their energy use, they do. So our 2 wastewater treatment plants are 2 of our largest electricity customers, and they have backup generation. So during energy shortages, we can call on them to reduce their energy use and go on backup generation so we could try to manage what's happening. So we do everything we can, like I said, but it's still going to be a problem. And it's not just this year. This is going to be a problem and a challenge for all electric utilities in California for the foreseeable future. So it's something that anymore we just don't know what we're going to be dealing with. We didn't know we were going to have a pandemic. You know, the wildfires have been going on for a number of years, but you just don't know where. And it's very impactful and very challenging for us. And I think, you know, we're pretty invisible when people turn their light, they just flip their switch and the lights come on and nobody really thinks about what's happening behind the scene or the scenes, but it's really, really hard work that has kept Roseville with its lights on during the last couple of years. So I'll knock on wood and hope we don't have to experience any outages like others, but it is a possibility. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Not seeing any questions. Can we move to the next agenda item?
Can we ask for public comment
Sorry,
on each
public
of the items?
comment.
Yeah.
If we could have public comment, the number to call in is 916-774-5353.
No calls.
No calls. So we can move to the next agenda item. This is the Roseville Electric Customer Programs and Services Overview presented by David Bradford, the Customer Solutions Supervisor.
Excellent. Good evening, Chair Webb and Commissioners. As you mentioned, my name is David Bradford. I oversee the customer programs for the electric utility. And tonight I'm going to take you through an overview of our programs and give you a little idea of what we do and why we do it and how we do it. I'll start off with the why. Our utility programs provide many benefits to our community. They help our customers reduce the cost to operate their homes and businesses. They encourage energy efficiency in practice and through the use of technology. They provide education to help our customers understand how they can use energy and how they can conserve energy. They encourage our customers to invest in their homes and businesses with incentives to make upgrades more affordable. These programs help our customers reduce the impact they have on the environment. Our incentives help promote new technologies in a way that encourages market adoption and drives down costs for these technologies. And they help us prepare for the future by allowing us to understand how our customers are using their energy. And it's worth noting that as a publicly owned utility, we're required by the state to offer programs and incentives and education that help our customers understand their energy use and better manage that. So, where does the funding come from for these programs? This year, our programs are made possible by two primary funding sources. As I mentioned, California legislation requires that publicly owned utilities implement a surcharge to fund public benefit programs. These funds are reinvested back into the community in the form of these programs. In addition, we participate in a state program that provides us with funding for electric vehicle programs. And here's a little bit more on those two sources. Back in 1996, the California utilities were required to establish a public benefit or a public goods funds. In Roseville, we allocate 2.85 of our annual revenues to meet this requirement. These funds must be used to invest in energy efficiency, education, technology, renewable energy programs, low-income rates and programs, as well as research and development. These programs help us meet energy efficiency targets, which are also required by the state, and must meet defined cost-effectiveness guidelines to provide these benefits to our community. Low carbon fuel standard. The California Air Resources Board has a program called the Low Carbon Fuel Standard. This program is similar to their cap and trade program, and by participating in this program, we earn credits that we can then sell and to entities who need them, and we're able to use these use the proceeds from the sale of these credits to fund our programs. These programs must be designed to benefit current and future EV owners and provide education and awareness of electric vehicle technology. So these are the primary funding sources for our programs this year. And now I'll take you through a list of the programs that we offer. And our programs fall mainly into three categories: building electrification, electric vehicles, and energy efficiency. And so I'll take you through those individually. Building electrification. As Michelle mentioned earlier, electrification is a big, very important objective of ours, and one that we need to respond to and help our customers with. Roseville Electric Utility recognizes the importance of preparing for the electrification of new and existing buildings. Electric equipment in homes and commercial buildings are more efficient, cleaner, and cleaner than natural gas-powered equipment. We're beginning to see interest in converting buildings to all-electric buildings, and we're prepared to meet our customers' needs by offering incentives and education to help our customers with this transition and making their move to all-electric buildings more efficient and more economical. Our programs also help new home builders to develop new all-electric neighborhoods here in Roseville. Electric vehicles. Driven by state goals and market demand, we're seeing more and more electric vehicles on the road. Our programs and incentives help us prepare for a future where electricity will be the primary source for fuel for transportation. Our programs help us understand what the future of electric vehicle demands will be and allows us to prepare now to meet those needs. And the best part of this is that we're able to use state funding for these programs and invest in infrastructure here in Roseville. And last but not least, energy efficiency. Here's where the bulk of our programs reside. Our energy efficiency programs help our residents and businesses and business owners upgrade to more efficient equipment, provide education, and support our low-income community. Our broad portfolio of rebates means that we can help our customers with almost any project that they're going to do in their home or business, as well as help them better manage their energy use and understand it better. Rebate levels for the incentives are assessed regularly to ensure that they provide value and are cost-effective. So for more information on that and a list of the incentives and the rebate levels that we have available, you can look for us, look at our website at roseville.ca.us/rebates, or you can give us a call directly at 79-POWER, which is also up there on the board. And for my group, which is the Customer Solutions Group, our focus is to continually explore ways that we can create programs that benefit our community. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
So a homeowner wanting to go solar goes through Empower Plus, is that correct?
A homeowner who wants to go solar has
A
many
Roseville.
options. A Roseville homeowner
Yeah.
has many options to fund that installation of that
But
equipment.
nothing through the city, it's all through,
The city does not have funding for going solar, but the Empower Placer program, as you mentioned, is a PACE program, which allows you to finance your equipment and put that on the property tax
Right.
of that particular building. Now, that program is about to sunset at the end of this year.
good to know.
Any other
Yes.
question here?
I thought I heard you say that it was more economical to have electric appliances, or I wanted to question.
Cleaner.
Because-
And there is an efficiency component to that. So a lot of the new technology, the electric equipment, has made advances in becoming more efficient than the gas equipment over the years.
It's not necessarily more economical at this time.
Thank you.
And that's where our incentives come in.
Think so.
Any other questions? I'd like to open this for public comment. The number is 916-774-5353. No calls. I'd like to move to the next agenda item. This is the Environmental Utilities Monthly Update. This is going to be presented by Richard Plucker, the Environmental Utilities Director.
Restore my honor here.
Thank you.
Rather than go into a lengthy EU monthly update, I really actually covered most of what EU's up to in the previous slides. So as to not steal John's thunder with me here tonight, I could talk about the drought and some of the things that we're doing, but John's here to actually talk about the drought. And with the presentation, you'll see on sort of the next item, John's filling in for Bobby Alvarez tonight. So with that, I would suggest we move to the next agenda item.
Go ahead and move. Do we need to do public? We're going to combine these two agenda items. And John, if you could go ahead and start your presentation, please.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners and Chair. I'm John Shannon. I'm the Water Conservation Specialist in the City of Roseville and the Environmental Utilities Department. And I work with Bobby Alvarez as the administrator. And so here's our agenda tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about the lake condition and water reduction numbers that we've had in the past, new water use legislation, and then we'll go into a little bit of a drought update. I know I'm keeping you guys between here and your homes and your loved ones and maybe your pets, so we'll get through this real fast here. So current programs and projects, and what we do for outreach and marketing and future efficiency programs that we may look at. Next slide, please. So currently, Folsom Lake storage conditions, as we know, are not looking positive. Right now, the lake is at about 26% of total capacity, and we're also about 35% of historical average. So the lake itself is typically total capacity around a little less than 1 million acre foot, and currently it's very low at 256 acre foot. So typically in this time of year, we could expect it to be around 733,000 acre foot. So it is dire right now. We're getting lower and lower. So next slide. So we have the elevation here, and the key point on this slide is when we look at August of 2020, the lake levels were around 400 feet there, and currently we're down about 327 feet there. This is important because at some point our intake levels could become a dead pool situation, and we would want to make sure that we have our wells and stuff in place and we have ample water to provide our customers as well. Next slide. As far as the annual water reduction, compared to our year that the State Water Resources Control Board gave us of 2013, we can take a look at the water reduction numbers. So 2020, we were looking pretty good up, and then COVID hit and indoor use went up. So with that, and the landscaping and stuff in the city also still being used by commercial projects and stuff, we've kind of lost in favor of savings. So we're currently at about a -2%. But as you can see, back in 2015, we're all the way up, into the 30% there. So we're looking to get some momentum in that and getting that back. Next slide. So the water reduction, this is a good slide to look at. If you have, take a look at the line that goes across up there. What we have there is the population of Roseville as it grows up to 2020. The bar charts there show you the gallons per capita per day, or residential gallons per capita per day are in the blue, and also in the green is the winter months. So we can look at that, all those averages there for the years. We started out with a large GPCD way back in 27, 28 over there. And then now you can see, even though the population has grown, we're still making headway on efficiencies. So that's great. Next slide. So some of the legislation stuff we're contending with right now, SB 606, AB 1668, we have to take account of some of these targets that the state is kind of looking at projecting onto water agencies. And so this will be accumulation of targets that will be added together for a lump sum of water that we will need to kind of meet at some point. So the only target that's been really assessed currently is the indoor water use, which everybody's heard about, the 50 by 2025. And then we have, it'll jump down possibly to, they're talking about potentially down to 42 in 2030. So that's not an individual household, so to speak, that we're going to be held to those standards. It's a global number that the city will be held to that standard, along with these other key areas here. So the outdoor use, that is what we call landscape area measurement. We were given by the state a flyover of our areas that have all the residential landscapes, and we went back, we'd look at all the plot numbers and APN numbers and everything, and we had to tally up what we thought was accurate, what were not accurate, some of the disputed parcels with other agencies, that sort of thing. So we sent our numbers back in on time for that, and they're supposed to be getting back to us with those landscape area measurements at the end of August here. So we'll take a look at those. Also, we're looking at water loss very efficiently as far as how much water loss is in our system. So that would be our distribution system. There's a lot of reporting that goes on with that. This is another target that has not been met, actually set yet. So Department of Water Resources is also looking at commercial, industrial, and institutional landscape as far as outdoor water use performance standards. The white papers are out, but there's no official standard that's being set as of yet on that as well. So all those combined are going to give us a large water budget that we're going to have to meet for the State Water Resources Control Board. Next slide. Drought update. So right now we're okay as far as water goes. It's, a lot of agencies are really taking a look at where they're at regionally. The governor's obviously issued back on July 8th, 15% voluntary water conservation. Regional Water Authority has also called for a 15% reduction, voluntary. But as of the end of the month, we're probably going to be moving to a drought stage 2, which is part of the municipal code, which will be watering days for residential and commercial. And this is the way that we're going to be able to meet our targets. Each water agency is going to be accountable to the state as far as what targets we're going to be having to meet. So internally, currently we're at a voluntary 10%. Like Rich mentioned before, we're working on PCWA Interties, things that will help us expand our capacity and resiliency. We're also got 2 new groundwater wells that are going in by 2022. Next slide. So current water programs for our residential programs. We have what we do is waterways house calls. We have a lot of staff that go out and look for leaks. We go through people's irrigation systems. We look at flow rates inside houses, that sort of thing. So in 2019, we did about 1,100. 2020, due to COVID pandemic, our numbers were down, but we're going to crush it this year. 2021, we're already at 592, so we'll probably be in the 1,300 range for total house calls or touches to people's homes. Cash for grass year to date, we're about 2 million square foot removed. So that's a positive for a lot of the areas that are not being used for athletic fields or something like that. And then we have water waste programs that are high use investigations and violations if people do not comply with the Roseville Municipal Code. And last year we did about 2,450 touches on those as well. Next slide. So the current programs we offer for residential, we do a lot of educational opportunities at the Exploration Center. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We offer virtual classes. We do green gardener workshops. We put on workshops for master gardeners, speaking engagements for HOA presentations, garden clubs, stuff like that. So we're pretty active in the community as far as trying to reach out to our residential customers. Next slide. And for commercial, very similar programs. We'll do speaking engagements. We have what we call the Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, which is inspections on new developments, single-family developments, as well as commercial buildings that are being installed, have to meet certain criteria now. I'm sure you've heard of MWELO with the state. We have an adopted ordinance of what we call Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, or WELO. So our inspectors will go out and do inspections to make sure everything is installed properly and there's water efficient equipment that meets what the plan specs say. We also have commercial rebates for large landscapes and custom programs for things like car washes to be more efficient, toilet rebates, that sort of thing. Sometimes we'll also contract out what we call a night patrol, which is a private contractor to patrol for water waste in the middle of the night on commercial properties to make sure that there are no broken components and things like that as well. Next slide. To tout our distribution, water distribution team, they have a very active leak detection program. And suffice to say, they have many touches on many different types of equipment that they have to maintain in the field: hydrants, valves, service lines. You can see there, they actually went out and inspected 7,000 service lines last year, did 59 miles of surveys on our infrastructure that's in the ground, as well as a potential savings estimated of about 12 million gallons in the field out that way. So these are all numbers that we report back to the state in our water management reports and urban water management plans and stuff as well. Next slide. Marketing and outreach. Every person or every house that we go to, we will give a customer survey card. They can now scan that barcode and have it go directly to the form, and they can fill it out that way, or they can physically mail it back in. We received some of the grades. Our staff, we're very fortunate to have just great people out there. We also have irrigation schedules online, plant lists. We have landscape plans online as well. So if you're interested in any of that, go to the water efficiency website and check those out. Next slide. Marketing and outreach. We have a great public information officer, Maurice Cheney, helps us do truck wraps, social media, ad campaigns, bill inserts, events. We do Mulch Mayhem. We'll go out to HP Earth Day. All kinds of different events that we're out and about. So just trying to get the word out how important our water is. Next. And then the digital campaign Maurice ran this year, really because of COVID, very interesting year to get out and reach people. The overview, basically, of the campaign, though, generated about 929,000 impressions and 4,000 links or clicks. So we can track all that, who's checking these things out online, and see kind of how many touches we're getting and how valuable these programs are moving forward in the virtual realm. Next slide. The Utility Exploration Center, it's a shared initiative between the Environmental Utilities Department and Roseville Electric. Great place to take your kids, grandkids, if you've never been there. It's a fabulous place for learning. Since its inception of 2008, over 640,000 program participants. They do great programs with schools, outreach events, like I said, where we teach our DIY classes for irrigation, and annual outreach program, 22 programs reaching nearly 10,000 people. So great work being done there. In the future of water efficiency, we're looking at more virtual house calls. Just to get information out, if people have questions, water-wise house call enhancements, we're looking at residential water budgets, not so much for billing purpose, just to get people on track with where they should be with their irrigation systems. Irrigation parts to people, we're looking at, minor parts, repairs and stuff we carry on the truck, that sort of thing. Toilet rebates, water savings champion program is new. We're going to be releasing that as soon as we can. It'll be a savings competition between people and HOAs and potentially beyond that. Residential outdoor programs. We're looking at flow sensing devices that you can put on your house. It will send you an alarm if there's a leak. Weather sensors, pressure regulation, that sort of thing as well. Also looking at possibly doing a H2O leader program, which is a leak evaluation, detection, repair program for low-income housing people and senior citizens that may not be able to fix some of their plumbing issues due to financial reasons. So, next. We have a lunch and learn coming up in August to talk to property management companies, large landscape companies, as well as community managers, HOA associations. Really want to get their feedback on what works on our rebate programs and how we can teach them to use the contracts they write with each other to leverage repairs and responsive water efficiency programs within their communities. So we're also doing, as Michelle said, the AMI, Advanced Meter Infrastructure Project as well. So we'll have some capability within that to have leak detection and ongoing leaks being sent our way so we can fix those as well. Next. Any questions?
Questions from here, this side?
Yeah, if I may, I'm sorry.
He's got
The water reduction cumulative? Oh, cumulative. I was just trying to figure out if I was reading this correctly. It looks like since 2013, the demand levels have come all the way back to within 98% of what they were. Am I reading this right?
Yeah, in 2013 was what the state deemed a normal year for water, and then we went into the drought, 2014, 2015. 17, 18, 19, 20, we were almost met Schwarzenegger's, or Governor Schwarzenegger's 20%. We were at 17. So with COVID in 2020, the numbers are basically going back. We're not having as much savings. So with people going back to work, hopefully we can get some more traction on that and get back to what savings need to be.
Well, what occurs to me is two things. First of all, people are tired of having an emergency, and so getting their people's attention on how low Folsom Lake is and how critical it is that people save water right now is hard. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is with more people being home, they're wanting to take care of their yards and they're using more water. And so both those things make sense to me, and both of them make it really difficult to achieve substantial savings, I would think. So I was just trying to, the word cumulative had me a little confused. We're all the way back to 98% of what we were in 2013.
Correct.
That's
Can I
pretty
have a
amazing.
clarification on that? Is that per person, or is that for the city as a whole?
It's a
Because-
cumulative of the whole city as a whole.
So the city has a lot more houses than it did,
Correct.
and those households probably use more electricity, water. So, but the city as a whole still has to meet this other goal?
The 2020 numbers are, we were almost there. So when I show you this other graph, the next slide, the population, has increased, but we've maintained a certain amount of reduction. So when we look at these water reduction numbers cumulatively, you're looking at commercial and residential within that.
Okay.
So we are trending back down to that 2%, but regionally and throughout the state, we're in the same boat as everybody else. It's not just Roseville. There's people being home and, like you say, using more water, more toilet flushes, more time in their yards, that sort of thing, really have totaled up. So how we're going to get around this is getting to the drought stage currently for the drought stage 2 and having watering days for customers, for residential and commercial.
And what are those watering days?
They will be Monday, 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I believe, for residential, and then Tuesday or Monday, Thursday, and Saturday for commercial. It'll come out, it's in the municipal code. If you look it up under 14.09 in water conservation, it'll break it down.
And that will begin when?
End of the month.
Okay. And just curious, SMUD went on odd even weeks ago. Why have we not done that? Just for my own information.
Even?
I'm not sure. SMUD, my children live in SMUD, so they've been on the odd even or every other, whatever it is, watering for quite a while this year.
Well, agencies are different. Water agencies, each have, if it's a city, they have a municipal code that they go by. If it's just a county or, say, like a private entity like PCWA, they all have different watering restrictions. So we have to go by what our municipal code says, and we can't, within that basic water conservation stage, we don't have the opportunity to do affect days.
It's where, like the lake is that triggers the overall supply on hand that then triggers a conservation program. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And forgive me for asking all
Yeah,
this.
no, it is. It's also reductions of how much we're being allocated by the Bureau. And so when we have reductions that come to us from the Bureau and we only get a certain amount, we start looking at drought stages. But yes, the lake that plays a lot of part into that. But yeah.
Thank you.
Now, once these restrictions go into place, what happens if someone is caught watering on the off days?
Good question. We do have an enforcement program. We do issue citations if necessary. As always, we're customer friendly. We're always about education. But there is a process in place where they have up to, depending on what the severity of the leak is or what have you, they could have just an irrigation issue of maybe up to 20 days or so before we issue a citation on that. So we have an enforcement process where we go out and we look at it, we issue a notice, we come back this following week, issue a notice, and then after that they could be assessed a fine. So starting at $100 all the way up to $1,000.
Okay. Now, does that matter whether it's a rental property or who would receive that fine?
we always go to the owner because the owner typically pays the water bill on the account. So, yeah.
How are we publicizing going into this, the watering restriction days?
Well, it'll be through our PIO, Maurice Cheney, and I know through council and probably our city manager, but it'll be well publicized end of the month, a couple weeks.
Pretty massive media blitz going to come on here
Yeah,
in the next
I
week or
imagine.
so. So it's coming. You won't, for the record, you won't have to look up the Roseville Municipal Code to figure out your days. We'll make that clear for folks.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I have one. On your water distribution system inspections, about how much of the distribution system is inspected through this program each year? Is it like 10%? Is it half?
This slide was pulled from our distribution superintendent, so there's certain, I think, if I can't read that thing there, it's so small, but I
have
believe
big
it's
ones.
60.
Get you close.
You can get back to me.
We have.
I'm just curious.
we
because-
have over 600 miles of distribution main. So
I'm like-
we targeted about 10% a year,
Okay.
which is a little quicker than the painting rate on the Golden Gate Bridge. But most of our infrastructure is actually not that old, so a lot of it's newer. But some of the core areas, if you've been down off Douglas lately, you can see that it looks like a war zone down there, and people will have nice brand new water lines, new fire hydrants that all meet modern fire protection standards. And most importantly, we thought it was important to get all the underground work done before we repaved the streets. So with any luck, we won't have to go in and cut, because to us, it's like catnip, right? If once you've paved a new street, and it makes sense because you go in there and it vibrates all the old pipes and the pipes blow up and then we have to go cut it open. So we're trying to do this in a more coordinated and sequential manner. So anyways, that's a big part of that rehab investment in the Corps.
Are there any other questions? I'd like to open this for public comment. You can call in at 916-774-5353.
No calls.
There's no calls. Next item on the agenda is board member, commissioner, and staff reports. I'll start on this side.
I would just note that I attended a briefing at the electric utility offices on proposed changes in electric rates. That was very interesting, informative.
I too attended that meeting.
And
And I
starting on
did
the
too,
other.
and
Likewise.
so did John.
Likewise,
So,
did
yeah,
you.
we're all-
Okay.
For the record, since we all got our wonderful Brown Act training tonight, the way that we did this to inform everyone of the potential electric rate proposal was we met 2 by 2s, 2 commissioners at a time or 1 commissioner at a time to make sure that there were no Brown Act violations. And so electric staff presented to only 1 or 2 commissioners at a time. And so that's how we can kind of get the information out to you beforehand without violating the Brown Act. So always making sure we're there.
I want to thank you for that time. It was very interesting. Well, we are at the end of our agenda. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Motion to adjourn.
And second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right, let's go.
Okay.
Well, and here's what I did. I wrote down the phone number.
She's doing that for money?
No, I'm like, okay, what's the number? Okay.
Is that just because the people are able to call in, or are they always able to call in? Like before the pandemic?
I don't remember them having the phone
no call. Yeah, I don't think they do that. Okay. I wonder how long, well, if it remains